Mr. Stevens, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Knoll?
Present.
Mr. McGlennon?
Here.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Here. Present. And we have Mr. Hipple is out sick, and Ms. Larson is en route. She should be here shortly. She's coming from a previous commitment in Richmond. We had a presentation scheduled today for a proclamation for Mr. Tim O'Connor from the Planning Commission, but he's unable to be here, so we're going to hold that and present it at the next meeting. We can schedule it for him to be here. And so we then come on down to the consent calendar. Today's consent calendar consists of the following items. Contract award, $262,166, Laurel Lane Elementary School Safe Routes to School Sidewalks by Timmons Group Incorporated. Number 2 is a grant award, $23,340, Community Paramedicine Software. Number 3 is grant award, $50,000, James City County Connect Program. And number 4 is minutes adoption. And I'll look for a motion for.
Motion to approve.
Okay, motion for the approval.
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Mr. McGlennon?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. Board discussions. We are down to strategic plan update, and I think Mr. Peirce is going to do the introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. It's been a couple months since we've checked in, but you'll remember that back in the fall, our consultant, Clarion and Associates, conducted the public input, the first public input phase for this project. They're with us today remotely to present the findings from that public input process, and then to start the guiding of the board on the goal areas. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Leanne King.
Great. Thank you so much, Jason. Can everybody hear me okay? I think I'm coming through. Great. Great. Thanks for your head nods. Can you all see my presentation screen as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. All right. So I'm joined today by Julie Herlins from Tischler Bice. She's our teaming partner that is working on the fiscal analysis components. So we're going to be covering several topics today. I'm going to provide a status update on the project, talk about what we learned from the public engagement that was conducted last fall, share with you our recommended plan framework for the strategic plan, and then we have some fiscal analysis questions that we want to get your feedback on before Julie and her team begin their work. So feel free to, if you have questions, let me know as I move through the presentation. Happy to take those. So as you can see here, we've got a process, about a year-long process that will be wrapping up the fall of this year. So we are kind of in midway to kind of a little bit more than midway through phase 2 focusing efforts. So we'll be completing that work this winter and into the spring, moving into phase 3 implementation. So this part is important because we're basically taking the inputs and the analysis we've done up to this point and starting to identify what the strategic plan is going to include and how it's going to be framed. So a little bit more about the work completed to date. You might recall as part of the phase 1 work, we did interviews with the Board of Supervisors, your departments, and key county partners. We also did an assessment of your 2035 adopted strategic plan and prepared the phase 1 summary report, which includes all of the findings of that work. For phase 2, we conducted the community engagement this fall. I'll have more information about that in a short bit. And we have a summary report that's up on your website that identifies kind of what we learned and who we heard from and more detail about those findings. We've also been working with your departments to identify the inventory of capital projects and operational initiatives and starting to work through what types of projects and initiatives might be included in this next strategic plan and looking at their ranked priorities. So they did an exercise last month or earlier this month, I should say, looking at the priorities of projects and initiatives and starting to identify in an early phase what the projects and initiatives might be that are included in the plan. So those 2 documents I mentioned, the phase 1 summary report and the public engagement summary report, those are both available on the project website, which is part of the county's website. If you just do a search for strategic plan, you should be able to find those 2 documents to get more information. So I'm going to share now the public engagement findings, a little bit about what was conducted, and really focus on some of the information about who we heard from and also what they shared with us, what we learned from those engagement findings. So you might recall there was a public workshop that was hosted on September 9th at Legacy Hall. We had good turnout there. There was also online engagement. The same exact activities that were conducted at the in-person meeting were available online from September 9th through October 10th, so about 4 weeks after that in-person workshop. And in total, across the in-person and online engagement, we had about 180 total individuals participate. So we were happy with that turnout. A little bit about who we heard from. So of those that completed the exit questionnaire portion of the survey materials, about 114 of those 180 respondents, almost 97% lived in James City County. So there were a few folks that live outside of the county, maybe workers that commute into the county for work on a daily basis. In terms of working, 25% actually said they work in the county and 75% do not work in the county. And that could also include folks that are retired and don't formally have a job because they're in retirement stage of life. In terms of race and ethnicity, you can see on the screen here in the green blocks the percentages of different races that were represented in the respondents. The red numbers express the 2023 5-year American Community Survey estimates for James City County. So you can kind of compare those. For Black or African American respondents, we had about 9.1%, which is a little lower than your actual representation in the county, which is 14.5%. For white, it was a little above, so 84.6% of respondents identified as white. Your county representation is a little over 78%. And then 2 or more races, 2.7% participated. The representation is 3.1. So this is actually pretty good. It's within the ballpark of what we like to see in terms of representation. We always want to make sure we're hearing from folks that are within the community. We also ask about Hispanic or Latinx identification, and we're a little closer actually within that category. So 94.3% of respondents identified as not being Hispanic or Latinx, which is close to the 92.6% that census shows is representative of the county, and 5.7% said they were slightly lower than the 7.4% that live in the county as of the 2023 estimates. Which district do you live in? We had more people responding that live in the Jamestown district, but fairly evenly split among the other. And we did have almost 13% of folks that weren't sure exactly which magisterial district that they lived in. So that's significant enough and noteworthy to share, because that could bump up some of the other categories as well. With respect to age, this was the one that, and this is very common, we find this across most communities that we do public engagement work. There's more of a skew towards folks that are in the 65 and over category, and in this case, 55 and over category. So again, the green bars and the black numbers show us the folks, the percentage of people that responded by age cohort, and the red identify the census representation. So we were a little low on the kind of younger folks, the 15 to 24 years. That's about 11% of population, less than 1% participated. 25 to 34 years old, we had almost 3%. It's about 9% of your population as of 2023. A little closer on the 35 to 44, 8% participated, and about 11% are what represent the county. And then we're pretty close on the almost spot on the 45 to 54 cohort. About 12.4% participated, which is almost exactly the 12% representation identified by ACS. And then you can see in the 55 to 64 cohort, that represents about 14% of the county and about 28% actually responded. 65 and older is about 27% of your county, and nearly 48% responded. So a little bit of a skew towards the 55 and older cohorts participating in this engagement activity. So what did we hear from members? The report has more detailed information that you can get into, the verbatim comments and all of the information, but we're providing here a summary of themes based on what we learned from their responses. So we learned that community members value public services, particularly parks and recreational facilities and emergency response services. They also value the county's commitment to providing high quality public services, your good communication and your fiscal efficiency. So I think that's a good sign that people identify that and that's highly valued, and they think that it's they get a good value for what they're providing. Things they were dissatisfied with include stormwater management, traffic, and overdevelopment. Those were the top 3 items that people identified when they were discussing things they were dissatisfied with. One of the questions that we asked was, looking at the array of services that are provided by the county, which are the kind of most important in terms of priority from a resident standpoint. And the order that people identified were: first, public safety; second, community development; third, land use planning; then public education, and courts and criminal justice. So that's really helpful to kind of identify what those priorities are in terms of the services provided within the community. Some other important priorities that were kind of raised up in other questions were stormwater management, public transportation, and libraries. We also asked respondents to give us information about their reactions to the strategic planning themes that were part of the phase 1 evaluation, some of the things that we identified that were new and different in the county, or a little or more enhanced in some respects from the last strategic plan. And you can see the list there of the different themes that we identified were kind of new issues to be addressing through this strategic planning effort. And we did get good confirmation from the respondents that those were also themes that they supported and they identified as important to be considering in this update. We also shared with them the currently adopted strategic plan goals and asked for their level of support for those goals. And there was strong support across the existing goals. Highest support for the 3 that you see on the screen there: sustainable long-term water supply, high quality education, and exceptional public services. We also got feedback from respondents that they wanted to see more emphasis on water quality, schools, housing, and community character in terms of the language that's used in the goals. We also asked about the potential for 3 new strategic plan goals that came about as part of the phase 1 assessment work. Those 3 goals focus on communication and transparent governance, engagement and retention of county staff, and attainable housing. And we did get good support from the respondents on the idea of those 3 new strategic plan goals. So pulling all of that work together, taking all of the phase 1 analysis completed and the community engagement findings, one of the things we wanted to share with you today is a framework for the strategic plan that really sets the stage for the more concrete projects and initiatives that will be included within it. And so the recommended framework builds off of some existing pieces and also adds some new pieces that we've developed as part of this process. So your mission and values, I'll share that in just a moment, that actually builds off of your existing mission and value statements. They're very much, I think, aligned with many of the ideas that have been discussed as part of this process. What's new are the guiding principles, so elevating some of the concepts that maybe weren't captured in the mission and values and having those as specific guiding principles for the strategic plan. And then the identification of goals. And one thing I will share is that because we got good, strong support in the phase one analysis work with all the interviews we did and from the public, the goals are not changing wholesale. There are a lot of goals that we're recommending be continued in this updated strategic plan with some adjustments. So I'll share those with you. And then the specific actions are those capital projects and operational initiatives that we're working towards in terms of what gets prioritized and put in the this next updated plan. So that's not complete today, but that will be coming in future phases. So looking at that first phase of the framework, your mission statement. So again, this is an established mission statement that you all use. We work in partnership with all citizens to achieve a quality community. I think having consistency across your different kind of visionary documents is important. So we recommend using that mission statement within the strategic plan, as well as the value statements that focus on integrity, collaboration, excellence, and stewardship. And I think several of those, again, were words and concepts that were identified in the phase one analysis work, and also feedback from the public in terms of things that were valued in the community. So those mission and values we recommend be the highest level of component for the strategic plan. And then moving on to the guiding principles. So again, these are new. This is something that we're recommending that you consider for inclusion within the strategic plan. And there are three of them. So the first one is service focused. So we are service focused and aim for a positive customer experience. Fiscally efficient. We prioritize fiscal efficiency when balancing decisions regarding operations, investments, and available resources. And the third component is transparent communications. We achieve transparent governance through clear communications and sharing critical information about the county's efforts and actions with the community. So I think those capture some sentiments that maybe the mission and values don't, but that are very highly valued and important, and we want to include. And they really cover and touch on all of the goal areas within the plan. So we recommended them as kind of lifting those up as specific guiding principles for the strategic plan. With respect to the next level, which is the goals, these are revised and they're in alphabetical order. You can see them here. So this is a slightly tweaked goals list from your currently adopted strategic plan with the addition of a few. So we've got collaborate to secure a sustainable long-term water supply. That one is grayed out at the top because we wanted to we wanted to consider with you whether or not that makes sense to continue keeping that as a long-term goal for the county government, considering the fact that JCSA is now operating independently, and that's really their long-term goal. Obviously, the county supports that goal, but not from a financial or kind of county services standpoint. And so that's a point of discussion to have with you, is whether you're comfortable having that goal removed or treating it in a slightly different way than the rest of the goals, where the county actually has a direct role in operations, funding, et cetera. The other goals: deliver exceptional public services, engage and retain county staff. That's a new goal. Expand and diversify the local economy, collaborate to provide high quality education, invest in modern infrastructure, facilities, and technology systems, preserve and support development of attainable housing. That's another new goal. And then protect community character and enhance the built environment. And again, these are in alphabetical order, so I think we can have some discussions about whether or not we want to actually have a hierarchy of goals and have, an ordering of priority. We've started here with alphabetical order just as a starting point. And I believe, that we move on to the fiscal. So let me stop here and just see if there are, on the goals that are revised here, are you all comfortable with us moving forward with these goals? And do you have any reactions to the idea of no longer including the sustainable long-term water supply goal because JCA is an independent entity that's managing that aspect of community service?
Sure, because it's our citizens that depend on the water. So I don't, somehow it needs to be, I think, somewhere throughout this, but we're kind of at a crossroads there too, because they are not sure, right now they've gotten a sort of a reprieve, but that could change with the next gubernatorial administration. So it's always kind of up in the air. But I don't know. I don't know how comfortable I am taking it completely out. But
I think just stay in there. Just stay in there because we are all on the board of the JCSA anyway, and that's our goal, to keep it viable for us. So I think it needs to stay in.
I would agree with you. I think that possibly maybe to use the language of collaborate with JCSA, which is, essentially collaborating with ourselves, since we are both the board of directors and the board of supervisors. But I think the interconnection needs to be stressed, and I think it needs to remain in the document, but maybe just a little more clearly that we're collaborating with JCSA because it's predominantly a JCSA major issue that they're working with.
That's very helpful and an easy fix. What about thoughts about the rest of the goals, particularly the newest to the engage and retain county staff and preserve and support development of attainable housing? Those were again included based on inputs that were received through the interviews as part of phase one, and as well, supported through the public engagement component of the process.
Yeah, I think I do too. I think they're both great. So,
Any other thoughts or reactions to these? Are you generally comfortable with them?
I think we're pretty comfortable with them right now, just with just as minor tweaks. I think it looks like we got some really good feedback from the public, which is what we're looking for on this.
Great. Okay. Well, happy to circle back if anybody has any additional thoughts about the goals or the guiding principles. So we can move into the discussion of fiscal testing of options, kind of fiscal options with respect to your fiscal model. So as part of this strategic planning effort, one of the aspects of work that our team is helping to produce is to look at the fiscal implications of potential strategic plan priorities. So thinking about different choices that can be made and the fiscal implications of those choices, whether it be a kind of capital investment, but probably more so on the operational side, and how it affects the general budget. So that fiscal analysis includes several components. The first is interviews with county staff. You do have a current fiscal impact model, and Julie and her team will be updating that through this work. Also, they are evaluating county staffing levels and comparing that to other communities of kind of similar stature to look at how the county kind of compares. And then they're going to be testing some specific fiscal questions related to the new strategic plan guidance and the priorities that we were just discussing, and the goals we were just discussing. And then they'll prepare a fiscal conditions report that will summarize all this work and share that with you at our next briefing, which I believe is scheduled for March. So before Julie and her team dive into that work, we wanted to make sure that we were aligned with you all in terms of the specific questions that we wanted the fiscal analysis to be responding to. So we had some initial discussions with your leadership team and talked with your various kind of department representatives that are involved in the strategic planning process, and came up with some questions. So a little bit of background on those questions. There's, testing up to 3 key questions is really the goal. So there are a couple of different things that can be modeled to explore how they might have an impact on the county from a fiscal standpoint. We will, particularly Julie and her team will be working to determine the specific assumptions that will be used in the fiscal model related to each of those questions. So we're going to talk conceptually today about the questions, but there'll be more detail that will be outlined and identified to actually implement those questions. And then some of the changes could possibly be duplicative. So an example there is if you wanted to test different staffing levels within the county, and then you're also wanting to test different, what we call level of service or LOS changes, those could have overlapping kind of implications with regard to staffing. So that's, we just want to share that that's a potential. Some of the testing choices might not be mutually exclusive. They might have some overlapping components. So I'm going to share with you the initial ideas about questions that could be tested through the fiscal model, and Julie's here to join and share some thoughts about these questions and respond to any other of your kind of ideas or options for test questions that we might want to be including. So some of the recommendations, we've got four listed here. One is increasing staffing levels for priority service areas. And there's a note here that we do know that there's been some work already that we want to be looking at if this were a question that we would be testing through the model. Specifically the space needs study that was conducted for the county and the comprehensive plan fiscal analysis assumptions for full-time equivalent employees. We want to make sure that we're kind of taking a look at that as well as looking at staffing levels in the county today and comparing it to other communities to consider what would be appropriate staffing levels to test. The second one is increasing retention or recruitment efforts for county staff. So, there would be some monetary impacts to the county with respect to that could be tested through the model to improve your retention and recruitment efforts. And then third is changes in level of service. You could increase or decrease based on community identified priority or some other type of prioritization in terms of the different services that are provided. And then the final one that was discussed was modeling the long-term operational costs of capital improvements. So thinking through when you have a capital investment, what are the actual fiscal implications on an ongoing basis to operate, maintain, manage that capital improvement? So that's, and looking at those with respect to maybe some of the capital projects that are being discussed as part of inclusion in the updated strategic plan. So let me stop there and see if anybody has questions about these four options or has additional ideas that they would like to see tested in the model.
I guess one thing that I'd be curious about is whether there is any way in this fiscal analysis to address the question of what do we do if economic circumstances change in one way or another during the next several years.
Hi, members of the board. This is Julie Herlands. I'm with Tischler Weiss. Appreciate the question. So if you could maybe elaborate a little bit more on that.
Sure.
In terms of, yeah.
Sure. Obviously, we go through different cycles economically, and occasionally we'll run into a period of some recession. And, what can we do to prepare ourselves for that kind of circumstance in terms of the possible need for a reduction in expenditures? How can we cushion ourselves in the possibility of that occurring? Those are the kinds of questions I'd be interested in.
Okay. I mean, one approach there, and maybe this falls under the fiscal efficiency question or the kind of, it's sort of paraphrasing in terms of what falls under that fiscal efficiency, but preparing for, kind of worst, the downturn, worst case scenario, or preparing fiscally is one kind of sort of straightforward approach is a reduction in assessed values, sort of a revenue on the revenue side of the ledger. Kind of, what we experienced with the previous recession with the housing downturn, the previous very, major recession is not the minor recession that we went through, but a housing downturn. So we could certainly sort of, and the challenge here is kind of not changing too many variables in each scenario and question so that we are able to explain the impacts and the implications when one or two things are adjusted in terms of the modeling and the effort. But I could see addressing that type of a question on the revenue side of things.
Well, I'm also thinking about it in terms of the personnel side. So, for instance, there may be a period of time in which we can't really fill vacancies. And so whether there are implications for the kind of cross-training that might be valuable for employees to be able to take advantage of might be something we want to be thinking about in terms of our HR.
Okay. Yeah, to be, and again,
I don't mean for you to react immediately to
sure.
this
Got
suggestion.
It. Yep.
It's something that I think might be worth giving some thought to.
Exploring. Great. Yep. No, I appreciate that. And of course, my mind goes directly to, how the assumptions to make within the model, but we certainly can explore that. And of course, I have some initial thoughts, but no, I appreciate that the two, or the how that would manifest itself in, a future, a testing of a future, of a scenario that kind of falls under that umbrella. So yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, thank you. I think that gives you the feedback we were looking at that.
Were you trying to narrow these 4 and other down to 3? Is that the idea?
Yes, I think if there are some that are, and again, they're not all entirely mutually exclusive, but if there are some that you think are more important to be testing, I think that would be helpful to share.
Long-term operational cost of capital improvements, I would think we would definitely keep. And the increased retention and recruitment efforts. I mean, number 1, you have to have number 2 to have number 1. So, so I would probably prefer that over and getting rid of that and then keeping changes in levels of service. So like the last 3 to me.
Okay.
Yeah, presumably keeping changes in the level of service would imply you're sort of rolling that number 1 into it.
Right. That could be the staffing could be potentially part of that level of service change.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
That, I don't know if that really helps. We just call it something different.
Yeah. Does Julie, does that kind of give you the guidance, or did you have any additional questions?
No, it's helpful. The detail, given this is a model, and that we will need to make specific assumptions about how that kind of translates. But this is good guidance of what the sort of kind of fulfilling, kind of filtering down through the more general to the conceptual to the more specific, and we'll work with staff. Staff on what that might look like in terms of, again, the specific assumptions that we would model themselves. But again, to Leanne's point about some of these things are not mutually exclusive, and changes in levels of service, and it's interesting because initially, our thoughts were the increase in levels of service, but to your point, Supervisor, there could be a decrease in a level of service to deal with an economic, economic hit, economic recession. So yeah, we will work through the details and communicate that back of what we've tested and how that translates into long-term fiscal implications.
Yep. Good. Yeah, I was having the same thought about the level of service being one way to take a look at that kind of economic, shift that we hope doesn't happen, but you want to be planning for if it were to. So that makes sense.
Yeah, ideally, we'd like to be able to project in a way that would allow us to anticipate the possibility.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it does seem like there's a direct relationship with level of service there. So that makes sense to kind of couch it within that testing concept. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So just in terms of next steps, so I mentioned that the technical advisory group that's made up of representatives of the various departments that work within the county, they ranked the projects and initiatives earlier this month, and your executive team had a discussion of those rankings and questions. We also had some discussions about the fiscal analysis questions. So we appreciate you listening to us today and sharing your thoughts about the fiscal questions. We can then move on to the next phase of work, which is actually we'll be scheduling some calls with your leadership team to talk more specifically about the assumptions to include and to make the adjustments to the fiscal model and then to do the tests. And then we'll share those findings early in March with the technical advisory group. And then we'll come back to you all later in March to share those fiscal analysis findings. And I believe that is, that's my last slide. So happy to answer any other questions that you might have. Otherwise, that's the end of our briefing.
The only question I had is way back in the very beginning when you talked about things that people were dissatisfied with, and you had, traffic and overdevelopment, which is not a surprise. But I was just sort of curious about the stormwater management. What was the level or the nature of the feedback about dissatisfaction with stormwater management?
I think it was generally just, and that's kind of a heavier term. Maybe another term that could have been used is just general drainage issues. So I think that, and I'm not sure if the timing of this survey came around a time when maybe you had some heavy storms, that it was front of mind of people. That can sometimes have an influence on people's reactions to those questions. But I think I don't think that there were specific geographies within the county that people were necessarily pointing to, but it was just general drainage, kind of stormwater drainage issues that were being identified in those comments.
Okay. Any other questions for?
No, I had the same question because I think we've done so much work on stormwater improvement in this county, and some things citizens there may be VDOT drainage issues that they are more referring to versus stormwater that the county is responsible for.
Correct.
So there needs to be a way of education there, I guess. So
Makes sense.
So do you feel you've gotten the feedback you needed from us for the session?
Yeah, it seems like you all are comfortable with the guiding principles, with the goals. We'll have more discussion about whether or not we want to prioritize those in the plan, and maybe that can come out of some of the discussions about the fiscal findings. And I think there's a relationship there, and also some of the ranking of the projects and initiatives. So some of this is a little bit iterative, and we'll circle back on some of those questions at future meetings with you. But yes, thank you. This was very helpful. I think we've got good guidance to move forward with our work.
We look forward to seeing you back in March to talk about the fiscal findings.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to our next discussion, which is the Employee Engagement Survey presentation. And Joni Legesse is going to give the presentation. Did I pronounce the name right? Okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and Mr. Stevens. Little background, employee engagement has emerged as a crucial factor influencing organizational performance and success. It refers to the emotional and intellectual commitment of employees towards their work roles and organizational objectives. Supported by studies conducted as recently as April of 2024, engaged employees tend to find their work more meaningful and report higher morale, and as a result, they're more likely to demonstrate higher levels of effort, creativity, and innovation, which in turn positively contributes to organizational outcomes such as increased productivity, higher levels of customer satisfaction, and lower turnover rates. In 2018, Human Resources developed the Employee Engagement Survey to measure conditions that can lead to engagement, and these questions established the framework for assessing the organization's workplace environment. We made edits this year to clarify some terms or questions that might have been confusing in past surveys, and we also made adjustments to response collection to secure more anonymity as a result of employee feedback and comments. On October 25th, 2024, James City County Human Resources invited all James City County, James City Service Authority, and Williamsburg Area Transit Authority employees to partake in the 4th Biennial Employee Engagement Survey. This survey is conducted to obtain employees' perspectives on several factors to help inform us about what we're doing right and what we could be doing better. All responses are kept confidential with no attempts to make connections back to any individual respondents, something we stress this year as the project switched hands. So our first slide shows an overview of our response rate, which did decrease quite a bit by about 28%. At the department level, half of them didn't reach 50%, and of the other 8 that did, half barely made it over 50. But there are a couple possible factors for this. We only offered 2 options for electronic access this year. We sent out an all-staff email, and then we had a link available on the employee portal, or employees could access, request a paper survey and hand it in that way. We also took a less aggressive, more laid-back approach to outreach this year versus past years when an all-staff email, a personal email, and personal reminders were utilized. That was due in part to an anonymity change. When I was first assigned this project, one of the first things I found was that our email addresses had been previously uploaded to our survey collector, which would prompt individual leaks to be sent, which would also spur some reminders every few days once we found that we weren't getting surveys in. This made employees feel tracked and they weren't as forthcoming with feedback, so this was one of the first things that I did away with. Part of the decrease could also be a calculation error on my part. That's just a reality when you're working with data. With the loss of email tracking, we had to do more manual reports and run some calculations. So to get the number of employees for the departments, I would run a report for how many employees were in active positions in these departments and their divisions as assigned by distribution code as of the survey rollout date. And then as completed surveys rolled in, I believe it was question 39 said, what department do you work for? And so I would take that, divide it by the number of employees, and that's how we got our percentage. Altogether, it was projected that about 1,115 employees were employed as of the survey start date. About 540 started or engaged with the survey, but only 483 completed the survey. The last possible reason for the decrease is attempts that we made to gain trust with anonymity actually had the opposite effect with too many changes being made. There's a new person handling the project. There were some new definitions. The stress for anonymity could have been too many confounding or intervening variables at once. Another way to look at this is if you look at the responses for 2022 and 2020, there is an asterisk there to indicate that past responses were found to differ from the data previously reported, so those percentages can probably be adjusted down slightly. It is important to keep in mind that there is no set standard for survey response rates based in peer-reviewed literature because surveys can be so subjective and a typical response rate depends on multiple factors as well as what's being measured. On average, the percentage of employees who complete and return a survey ranges between 30 and 60%, and research supports that online surveys actually get less engagement for the reasons already addressed here and an effect similar to that of the bystander effect. A lot of employees will think, oh, they're probably getting a lot of responses, so me not participating won't make or break results. What we can focus on moving forward is how many respondents we need to represent our full headcount, as the ideal amount of participation is determined by the sample size. So if the total possible amount of surveys we could have received is 1,115, and we wanted a 95% confidence level with a 4% margin of error, the ideal sample size would have been around 391 responses, which we surpassed with 483. Regardless, we will need to revisit how to better collect responses in the future for accuracy and validity. You'll see in human resources, we did have a 100% completion rate. There are 7 employees in human resources, including myself. 7 employees completed the survey and identified themselves as human resources employees, but I did not complete one, so that number is not completely accurate. Our next slide breaks down the demographics of the survey takers this year. A new option this year was allowing employees the option of prefer not to disclose. It added a layer of anonymity, which was a benefit, but the drawback is it makes it hard to compare to previous year's results because of the new variable.
Hey, can I stop you for just 1 sec? I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what was the problem with the remaining anonymous previously?
It was a common comment from employees that they felt like their responses weren't being kept confidential.
Did we do anything to ensure them that their responses being kept confidential?
Yes, it's definitely something that we stressed if they called about it. I'm not sure in past years if anything was done afterwards, but I can definitely look into that.
I mean, were we putting in an email that they were confidential, or?
Yes, we stressed that this year.
Okay. But then we didn't, but what, in the year past where we had the issue that I'm just trying to figure out why they wouldn't have thought that they were confidential.
It's just a frequent thought process with employee engagement surveys, and there were quite a few calls that I had received up at the front desk about, is this really confidential? It's being sent to my email. How does it know I didn't complete a survey if this isn't being tracked, if this is truly confidential?
Ms. Larson, I would just add, that is not new to this year. That is just groups of people in general, their computer, they are sure we can track it back to them. We try to reassure them we are not doing that. There's some comments that get written that would let you read the comment and maybe figure it out, but we are not using this data for that purpose, but trying to impress that upon our employee base or any group, I think, is difficult. And most employees, I believe, the feedback is what they wanted to share with us and is very helpful. So,
Okay, thank you.
yes, ma'am.
Last important thing to note about the participant overview slide is for race and ethnicity, we updated it this year to match the EEOC categorizations. Again, that kind of makes it hard to compare past results. Overall, we had some decreases in some areas, which can be explained by natural occurrences such as turnover, employees gaining more tenure, or just naturally getting older. If we were to distribute the prefer not to disclose responses accordingly, they would probably be similar to that of past years. This next slide looks at items with the highest and lowest levels of agreement at a glance for the survey year. It's probably important to point out that the timing of the survey differed from those in 2022, 2020, and 2018, which were conducted during the last 2 weeks of August. This year's survey was conducted from October 25th, 2024 to November 15th, and we extended it to December 2nd due to a lack of complete responses. The 2024 employee engagement survey results show increased satisfaction overall, with the highest percentage levels ranging from 85% to 96%. Employees are still sharing positive feedback about their ability to meet the needs of the community and their leadership, but they are still struggling with some stronger feelings of consistent fair treatment when it comes to performance, growth, and information sharing. A few things worth noting on this slide is question 5, I respect my department director as a competent professional. That moved up 2 slots from last year. It went from 79% to 90% agreement. And question 15, my workplace is safe. That had a decent increase from 81 to 89% and also moved up about 2 spots. Over on the lowest percentage level of agreement side, we had 2 new questions. Question 20, all employees are treated fairly in my department. It actually had a decrease from 70 to 65% this survey year. And question 12, there's a strong feeling of teamwork and cooperation in this department. It actually saw an increase from 61% to 70% this year, but it still was the very last question on our lowest percentage levels. Apart from 2 questions on this specific list, all questions this year saw an increase from their 2020 ratings, and throughout the entire survey, all but 1 question had an increase from 2022. I also want to give special mention to question 28, satisfied with overall compensation, pay, and benefits. Although it is on the lowest agreement level list, it was actually on the top of this list in 2022, and this year it had the highest change that you'll see when we get to that slide. So to reiterate and summarize here, despite the lack of turnout, there are some really good things happening here and positive interpretations that can be made. So the first section of the survey was departmental purpose. This category has the highest percentage levels, indicating employees see not only the purpose of their work, but how each person's work relates to the department's purpose and outcomes. While this section did have the lowest rate of change across the survey, that can be seen as a positive because it means we are consistent in understanding what we do and why we do it across departments. One thing that did catch my eye was question 4. Customer needs are the top priority in this department. It had the highest increase in this section, but it's the only one that's not in the 90th percentile, and it has the biggest gap in ratings from 2020. Comments in our open-ended responses expressed praise and high support for taking care of our citizens, residents, and community well. But given that we also define customers as visitors or businesses who depend on the quality of our services, that might be where we're falling short in bridging the gap from 2020, which could make sense since we are back to regular levels of visitors and interacting with businesses, after the COVID-19 pandemic. The next section measured department leadership. This is probably one of the most edited sections of the survey compared to 2022. We stressed that this section was how you viewed your department director only, not your assistant directors or supervisors. Compared to past years, there were mostly significant increases in employee perceptions of their department's director, as evidenced in the increases in questions 5 and 6. I respect my department director as a competent professional, and my department director demonstrates strong leadership skills. We can infer that this helped with employees' understanding of professional purpose mentioned on the last slide. Even when it comes to addressing poor performance, although that percentage is a little bit lower than we would like it to be, there has been a vast improvement from 2022 that would be beneficial to investigate to keep trending upwards. The information sharing and work environment sections reflect interpersonal relationships between workers and supervisors. When information is openly shared and there's a sense of transparency and the person leading your department is doing a good job of that, as evidenced in questions 9 and 10's notable increases, it causes a positive correlation or kind of a trickle-down effect, if you will, within the work environment. Contrary to the previous survey year, early analysis is showing that team leads and middle managers are reporting higher levels of satisfaction with information sharing than non-supervisors, but all levels do report a decent level of satisfaction starting at 66%. Overall, there have been marked improvements in this section, surpassing even 2020 by the smallest margin, in more areas than not. Open-ended responses support this with praise regarding having information and resources to support citizens feeling safe and that communication is in a good place. Section 5 of the survey looked at workplace culture, which broadly put defines the collection of shared values, attitudes, behaviors, and norms of the organization that shape how things get done. I want to point out question 16, my department works to attract, develop, and retain people with diverse backgrounds. This question was actually on 2022's list of lowest agreement level with a 59% rating, but now it has a mid-70s% agreement. It was actually replaced by question 12, the one about teamwork and cooperation. Despite low to average percentile ratings from a big picture perspective, fair promotions and advancement, as well as attracting, developing, and retaining a diverse workforce, saw fairly significant increases this survey year. One of the most important motivators in the workplace is feeling like you are valued, respected, and heard. So we want to look into what we're doing right and how to keep improving those question satisfaction ratings. You'll see there is a much stronger rating of feeling respected this year amongst employees. However, that seems to be contradicted by the decreased rating of feeling as though they are treated fairly, seen in questions 19 and 20. So that's also going to be something that we will want to investigate. The second to last section of the survey was accountability and performance management. This saw the second and third largest increases overall in the survey from both 2022's and 2020 surveys. Department directors were perceived as being held more accountable for achieving results, and supervisors being more actively interested in their employees' professional development and advancement despite the overall mid to average percentile ratings. Questions 24 and 25 regarding feedback and praise and recognition had the highest agreement levels in this section, which are great boosters of morale. However, I also want to draw attention to questions 26. My supervisor is actively interested in my professional development and advancement, and question 23. My supervisor is consistent when administering policies concerning employees. When you have a supervisor that is actively interested in your growth and is also consistent across the board with some things, such as administering policies, That not only boosts morale, but helps drive fair treatment. So, in order to help figure out the shortcomings in workplace culture that we just pointed out, that also had a similar percentage increase, this might be an area of focus to start with. Also, tying back to the section directly focusing on department directors, which also saw an uptrend for all questions from both years, it's fair to draw a correlation between the positive changes in department leadership and accountability and performance management. The last section of the survey was job satisfaction, and it was rated remarkably higher this survey year and mostly from 2020. The questions which saw no change or a decrease in rating could be from the final stretches of recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic as we fill open positions and reduce overall workload from those vacancies and return to a better work-life balance. Satisfaction regarding compensation, pay and benefits saw the largest increases from both 2020 to 2022. Mostly in part from the Bolton compensation study changes that went into effect on October 1st, 2024, which was the beginning of the month the survey was rolled out. As far as open-ended comments and next steps go, we did allow additional comments regarding overall compensation. We received about 103 total responses. It was a pretty even split of 1/3 being positive, 1/3 expressing some dissatisfaction, and 1/3 being neutral or otherwise hard to tell. They said some good things, some not so great things, but they overall didn't lean one way or another, or they even offered suggestions. Item 31 of the survey asked, what are we doing well? We received 270 responses, but when broken down, that actually came out to about 450 separate sentiments or topics. It was a broad range concerning the compensation study and their pay, their benefits, serving the citizens and the community, communication and accountability, relationships among the team and with supervisors, overall just saying that how they feel at work overall is really positive. The areas that need improvement, though, most common sentiments there also included communication and accountability, compensation and pay, and work-life balance, but they were more department-specific. So we provided the department directors with individual results, and they, HR and county administration, will work together to address concerns. We'll be using this data to identify and address factors impacting dissatisfaction. Directors will meet with managers, supervisors, and team leads to identify focus areas for improvement opportunities. We also want to continue conversations with the workforce on a regular basis to ensure we hold up, as well as improve upon past survey years. That's all I have today, unless there are any questions.
Questions?
So I think most of my questions are going to be for Mr. Stevens, but you yourself said, oh, the human resource total isn't correct because you didn't take it.
Correct.
Okay, so what do we do for next year? I mean, do we use this same, did we make it up? Is it SurveyMonkey? Who's our, I guess, our platform here? How do we make sure that we get correct numbers?
So the platform this year was SurveyMonkey. It could have been a confusion on that part. Sometimes human services, which is now social services, still kind of misidentifies themselves as human resources. We get a lot of calls like that. Or it could have been somebody that was trying to protect their anonymity. So that's something that we'll need to look into as to how do we better gain valid and accurate responses without compromising.
Okay, so you said we a couple of times. So Human Resources has this now. There's some that you won't be able to address that Mr. Stevens will have to, but you go back, sit down, talk about ways that you might address some of the things that, overall looks pretty good, I think, and especially the areas in which there was an improvement. But like you said, there were a couple of areas that need to be worked on. So you all will sit down, brainstorm, and then assign somebody that's going to work with department heads or go to try to work on certain areas, or what's the next step?
So we'll want to identify initiatives that'll help us, what we're doing well right now, how we can keep doing that, and then if it's a departmental issue, kind of brainstorm with department heads about how they want to move forward and make improvements.
And Ms. Larson, I think if she goes to department-specific items, one of the things we hear at every survey is we don't hold our employees accountable. And I think that is not correct, but the perception is we are not. And so some of that is if I discipline an employee, you as a coworker shouldn't know that.
Right.
So we can be in working with somebody, trying to hold them accountable. We do dismiss employees. We do have performance improvement plans, but we're not telling people that. And so I don't know how that rating gets better except everybody pulling their load and doing their part. And so some departments may have a bigger perception of that, or maybe it's leadership and they don't care about employees. So what you've seen is the aggregate data for the county. Johnny is sharing with departments their individual data, and we do use that to sort of say, maybe we need some more leadership training in this area, or at least an awareness of this is what your employees perceive and how do we help improve upon that. Not that we get everybody to 90 or 100%, but we ought to be able to move these numbers upwards over time. And this year they mostly have increased, which is a good sign. Back to your question of how do we make sure everybody is individualized? We certainly could overcome that with technology, but I think that gets back into people saying, well, if you know I did it, then you know my responses. And so we've got to balance, how do we not oversell that we're really tracking that you only did it once. And some computers could be used by multiple employees. Maybe I go and use somebody else's computer so you don't know it's me, because we do have some employees who would be maybe suspicious of that and don't want their comments tracked. And so I don't want to limit their ability to provide input. But I also want to have a survey that I feel is good and representative of our employee base. And I think they have been, with a few comments that you sometimes, or other things that may or may not be accurate. I think overall we are getting good data and using that to improve what we're doing, or take their suggestions that they're providing to make it a better workspace.
Yeah, I mean, has there ever been anyone punished over a survey done? So, I would urge people to fill them out, because you can't change anything if we don't know that it's going on. And so, I'm sorry there's but I get surveys all the time, and it just knows my email hasn't done it. But I'm not fearing that somebody is, and if they are, okay. I mean, if you really want something to happen, you gotta be truthful. So, but okay, that's the end of my questions. Thank you.
I was just pleased to see some significant changes from the 2022 survey, and also the fact that we even saw some from 2020. This one of the things that I wonder about is, to what degree is it the actions that we're taking versus the changing stress level versus because of COVID receding, and to what extent, I mean, I think it's clear that we've taken actions. The administrator's taken some very important actions to communicate clearly that he wants to know if there are issues, and to address those issues, and to see the results.
Barbara, anything? The only thing I would add is, I guess, we had a sample size that was adequate to give statistical reliability to it. But I would encourage our employees to fill the thing out. Sometimes you take surveys to express your displeasure. Quite often people don't fill out a survey if they're happy. So, but you can't make that assumption. So what we want to tell our employees, I think the message should be loud and clear, is that we do want to hear from you. We want to hear what you have to think, because there's no way we can fix things if we don't know about it. And I think that's sort of the feedback. And I will reiterate, there should be, I know people are concerned about anonymity, but we will do everything in our power to make sure it is totally anonymous, because we're not interested in identifying individuals. We are interested in identifying trends that we need to be able to fix. And so that I appreciate the briefing on it. It looked like we like Mr. McGlennon said, we made some improvement, but we always want to focus on what we can do better. Thank you. And I'll pronounce your name correctly next time. Okay. We are now to the General Services Headquarters update, and Grace Boone.
Well, good Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Stevens. Grace Boone, Director of General Service, and I'm here today with Sean Gordon, our Chief Civil Engineer, and Andrew McKinley, Principal Architect with Via Design. We are here to provide you with an update on the future General Services building. Although some of you are familiar with this project, I want to provide a little background for those who are not. For the past 40-plus years, General Services and the James City Service Authority has been co-located on the Tuning Road complex. With the growth of both entities over the years, we do not have any ability to expand our operations on this site. In 2020, the county conducted a space needs study resulting in the need for a new general services facility. With this board's approval, we move forward with the project. We identified a parcel located next to the Law Enforcement Center on Opportunity Way as the feasible site. In 2024, we contracted with Via Design Architects to design the facility along with associated site improvements. I will now turn it over to Andrew McKinley, Principal Architect with Via Design, for a short presentation.
Thank you, Grace. Thanks for having me here this afternoon. Again, Andrew McKinley, Via Design Architects. We're based out of Norfolk, Virginia. We've got a presentation to be able to share with you guys. I promise this is not statistic heavy. This is a little bit more focused on some graphics. I think the prior two presentations were fantastic, but we'll take a little bit of a shift here. Okay. Sure. So again, Via Design Architects, we also partnered with a design firm called SQ Dumez Ripple. They're based out of New Orleans, but they have a DC office as well. Not uncommon to have two different architecture firms collaborate on projects. So we kind of got you surrounded, so to speak. Process to date. All right, so if you don't mind. Thank you. So since we were contracted around May timeframe of 24, a lot of what we do to get started is what we call information gathering. Not a very high-tech term, but certainly a very important part of our process in terms of getting information and developing a design concept. So we were given a program that was based off of a 2043 space needs assessment, which is a great starting point. We spent a lot of time reviewing and validating the information that was contained within that. We also conducted some programming workshops. So the program, as we would refer to it as architects and designers, is the grocery list of all the spaces that you would want to have in your building. So programming workshops go through and validate that information. We conducted a series of workshops that have what we call bubble diagrams. So reviewing and evaluating adjacencies of different departments, for example, individuals within those departments, so that as we start to rearrange the building on the site, we already kind of know and understand a little bit more about how these different departments and people are going to interact with one another. Red dot, green dot, you can see an example right here is just, hey staff, come up here and take a look. It's a graphic version of a survey of what do you like, what do you not like, and then through some additional dialogue, we learn a lot about the preferences of the different departments, divisions, and the department as a whole. Several precedent facilities tours, always interested to explore and get a little bit of taste and flavor of what else is out there, what other general services departments are doing general services well. We definitely found that regionally speaking, there's a lot of diversity. So some of the facilities that we wanted to tour out west a little bit tend to get a lot more snowfall than we do here. And so trying to make sure that we're staying within geographically a reasonable climate and similar functionality of what James City County is. Day in the life, the divisions of general services actually run very different schedules from one another. Some arrive very early in the day, go out into the field and perform their work and come back relatively early. Some are starting kind of a typical 8 to 5 office type environment. So when we're starting to plan for the spaces within the building and how to build teamwork within those divisions, we take a lot of that into consideration, who's in the building and when. And then sustainability priorities, where do we focus our time and energy in order to look at cost impacts, capital projects, one of your The concept development, the top 3 graphics here illustrate a couple of just ideas of how to arrange different division groups with a shared core within the middle of this gray box area. And as we explored kind of where can vehicles go, how would they circulate on site, and then some future planning. This one graphic at the bottom expands between the concept of the general services building in the middle, a potential future fleet building on the left, future warehouse and fuel station on the right, and I think there was even a fire station on the right. Trying to arrange those things graphically. I think the next slide here will get into a lot more detail and help you to visualize kind of how that concept came together. So what you're looking at on the right-hand side of the screen is a kind of a site aerial or a map of the site, Stadium Road running north and south, and then the large Dominion utility easement running east and west at the bottom. Currently, it's a heavily wooded site. It has a lot of topography. There are existing wetlands on the site. It all drains to a larger War Hill Sports Complex stormwater master plan. But the portion of the site that we're working on here with this paving and building is the flattest portion of the site. It's certainly the most logical in terms of circulating vehicles, particularly trucks and other vehicles that tow behind things like trailers. So to further orient you, in the far upper right, that's the parking lot of War Hill High School, if that's a point of reference, and then the Law Enforcement Center is just off the page to the top of the page. Color-coded are different divisions and organize this building from the previous concept that you saw. So what we're trying to do here is divide the site into some logical, functional arrangements, both from ease of access to the site, but also safety, security, protection of county vehicles and things. So on the upper right here, where you see the number 5, there's about 160, 165 parking spots for staff, and that accounts for the 2043 staff increases. So staff and visitors would park there when they arrive. Down below that is some circulation where you kind of in between the numbers 3, 7, and 6. It's just circulation from a grounds shop garage. And then where you see number 4 is a large parking area and circulation for county vehicles. Color-coded number 3, the red box, is a grounds vehicle bays. Planning for those to be 60 feet wide, so an F-350 with a 24-foot trailer, be able to pull in there, close the doors, protect it from the weather, prepare for tomorrow's field trips and visits, and then in the morning kind of pull out and pull off site. Where you see the yellow with the number 1 is where facilities shops would be housed. And so those are the folks that are doing the HVAC, the light fixture replacements, plumbing parts, cabinetry, furniture assembling, painting, etc. And then where number 2 is kind of where everybody comes together. So facilities offices, grounds offices, and then there's a second floor with some additional offices. So ideally here in number 2, we have a large training space for the department, as well as some gathering space like a kitchenette, the shared restrooms and things like that. Here's kind of a zoomed in floor plan on the first floor. This is slightly rotated from the prior slide that you just saw, but you can see the grounds vehicle bays and trying to align our parking lot outside, so we got the opportunity to just pull those things straight through. Facilities workshop broken out with its several different kind of storage and workshop areas. And then this central area towards the top of the page where visitors would come in at the training and meeting room. So the idea being that any county department could potentially use the space. It would not interfere with the daily operation functioning within there. But the space would also serve as general services, kind of large gathering and up to the second floor, some of the other divisions that have not been cited yet. So administration, you can see we're solid waste, sustainability, and capital projects as well. So the idea of stacking this building on site helps to provide for the vehicular circulation that we're looking for on the site, which is really the main driver of how the entire building and the site is organized. That of our next steps, getting further with design development, and then jumping into research showing specific for the department.
Just have a question. Can you go back to the colored page? So the ground, number 3, is that where, is that where they're going to fix the vehicles too? Where's the repair shop?
So
Yeah.
So fleet is not going to the site in this phase. The grounds maintenance shop is just that. It's for the grounds maintenance vehicles. It's where we'll park our, snowplow sand spreaders. You know, we park them in multiple bays now at different facilities to ensure that we have them. This will house everything. It gives us the ability, to put a lot of our equipment inside, during, the season when we're not using them as much. So there's storage for, you know, to extend the life of our equipment.
Just want to know where, so number 3 is where they're going to be fixed too, right? I mean, that's repair shop, everything.
That is what you're thinking is our fleet management
Yeah.
shop. We do some repairs to mowers and tractors on our own, equipment, the
Right.
ground staff does. But if you're thinking of heavy equipment like police cars, fire trucks,
Yeah.
pump trucks, that still stays at tuning,
Okay. Okay.
at the fleet maintenance shop.
They're not moving that. Okay.
They're not moving now.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
I'm not allowed to play any MASH music, so you know how I feel about a new building, so. Exciting.
So I guess we're at a, next steps is your design development and cost estimates. What kind of time frame do you expect to come back to us with any further information or board requested action?
Our schedule is, we're going through schematic now, I would say.
Okay. Expect to see you back this spring. Okay. All right.
When do you hope to be in construction?
Fall of 25.
It said will take about 18 months, so winter of 27, early spring of 28, we hope to be cutting the ribbon, so.
Thank you.
Any other questions for? Okay. Thank you, Grace.
Thank you.
Okay, our next one is ARPA funding. Stephanie Williams-Ordery will give the presentation.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you for having me here today. Stephanie Williams-Ordery, the Grants and Special Projects Analyst for the county. And I'm here today to provide an ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act update for you. As you're probably already aware, we received $14.8 million in Corona state and local fiscal recovery funds in 2021. We are managing those funds in a separate fund in order to adhere to the extensive reporting and audit requirements that come with that. There were 4 eligible categories to apply through, and we applied under the providing government services to the extent of revenue reductions due to the public health emergency. This was really the broadest option with the most flexibility, so that's why we chose that. Funding was allocated for 26 projects. 15 of those projects have been completed and 11 remain open. There were 2 key dates as part of this funding, and all funds had to be obligated by December 31st, 2024. And I'm very pleased to report that we were able to do that. All $14.8 million were obligated. And now we have the deadline of December 31st, 2026 to expend those remaining funds. All right, so now I'm just going to do a brief overview of the projects. I'm going to start with our completed projects. James City County identified highly feasible projects that did not require additional staff and were recommended in the short and medium timeframes from the Workforce Housing Task Force study completed in 2019. James City County engaged consulting services with Virginia Center for Housing Research and Housing Forward Virginia to review legislation as it pertains to the county's ability to require and incentivize affordable housing as part of the approval process for new residential development in order to enhance affordable and workforce housing in the county. Also, a portal was developed on the county's website to provide resources and information to those in the county with housing assistance needs. This portal further provides information for other social determinants like energy assistance and resources for those suffering from food insecurity. A limited term housing specialist position was created in the housing office to oversee the local housing choice voucher program that was also implemented under ARPA. This position is now funded in the general fund effective January 1, 2025. 12 local nonprofit organizations received grants from James City County as part of this funding. Faucets and toilets were converted to touch-free restroom fixtures in county facilities during the pandemic to prevent the spread of disease. An additional emergency generator was installed at the James City County Emergency Operations Center. Funds were further used to complete the design for the renovation of the satellite DMV office and ADA compliance updates in Building D. A limited term position, Capital Projects Coordinator, was also created to assist with the increased demand on general services for ARPA funded and other projects. This position is also funded now in the general fund effective January 1, 2025. We had originally allocated for a tourism and hospitality grant program, but that received a separate grant award, so that project was canceled under ARPA, and we had originally looked at the Lower County Park project, but that was moved to the CIP due to timelines. The replacement of the Chickahominy Riverfront Park well facility will provide a safe and reliable source of water for the park and is critical for James City County's ability to effectively operate the outdoor facilities for the community and to enhance the travel and tourism sector. This project was also moved to CIP due to timelines. It was partially funded through ARPA, but then moved to CIP. Improvements to the James City County Marina were completed to support a new restaurant that will be privately funded and operated. This restaurant would enhance existing services at the marina, expand the local tax base, and positively impact that sector of our local economy that was significantly impacted during COVID. Improvements included utilities, stormwater, landscaping, and parking. Again, part of this project was funded through ARPA and has been shifted to the CIP due to timelines. There were marina structural improvements to take place at the marina building to ensure that travel, tourism, and hospitality operations associated with the marina continue to safely serve visitors. A limited term procurement specialist position was created to assist with solicitations, contract awards, and oversight associated with the increased demand on purchasing personnel due to the large number of ARPA-funded projects and other departmental needs. This project was partially funded through vacancy savings in the ARPA Capital Projects Coordinator position, as that position remained open for more than a year. And this position, too, now is funded in the general fund effective January 1st, 2025. A limited term grants and special projects analyst position was created to support the development, execution, administration, and reporting for ARPA projects and initiatives, as well as other grants and special projects. Costings included personnel, equipment, furniture, and building construction to create an office space for this position. This position, too, is now funded in the general fund effective January 1, 2025. In 2022, the county administrator recommended pay increases and incentive payments to public safety personnel to help address significant staffing shortages due to recruitment and retention challenges. These expenses were funded by ARPA beginning in October of 2022 until they could be incorporated into the regular annual budget in FY24. And now I'm going to share with you our open projects. Most housing projects are funded by three streams: state and local funding, James City County budget allocation, and program income. Due to the pandemic, the Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development ordered that all monthly payments from homeowners under the CDBG and indoor plumbing repair programs must be forgiven, thus eliminating a source of funding for local housing projects. Funding under this project supported a home repair blitz and developed in partnership with Habitat for Humanity, joining forces to provide home repairs to veterans, low income, elderly, or disabled homeowners in James City County, as well as the development of parcels on Catalpa Drive, Clark Lane, Old Moortown Road, and the Moses Lane area properties, which will all be developed into affordable and workforce housing. The acquisition of property project established to acquire property did just that, develop a new neighborhood with homes for sale or rent that are affordable to families with low to moderate income. As of December 2024, 3 properties have been purchased and an additional property on Moses Lane is under contract. The Local Housing Choice Voucher Program provided financial housing subsidies and housing counseling services to households in the county who earn more than the federal HUD limit of 50% of the area median income of $42,500 for a family of 4, yet cannot afford safe and decent housing on their own due to economic loss as a result of the pandemic. The total number of participants to date is 43, with 21 of those being children less than 18 years old. These families have achieved the following outcomes that I believe are noteworthy: a total combined savings of over $4,600, total combined debt reduction of over $8,000, an average credit score improvement of 144 points, and a total combined increase in annual income of over $18,000. There are 15 families currently receiving subsidies at an average of $450 per family per month. Contracts are in place to fund the subsidies for a total of 24 months or until December 31st, 2026, whichever is reached first. ARPA funds were used to fund the architectural services for the new General Services Building, Administration Building. Also, we have some additional projects still pending under the transportation match. During the pandemic, there were revenue reductions and the transportation match budget was reduced significantly. ARPA funding allowed $275,000 in priority transportation and roadway infrastructure projects to still be completed. ARPA additionally funded the 30% design and construction management for the Government Center. And the Ambler House project was established to construct utility improvements, including water, sewer, and electric service at the Ambler House located in Jamestown Beach Event Park. The extension of the utilities will allow the county to put this property back in use as a special event space. This will not only serve as an asset to the Jamestown corridor, but also will generate lease and tax revenue. The additional park improvements will increase visitors to the site and facilitate more event opportunities that will also generate revenue. The original request included funding for a portable stage and restroom trailer, but those projects were funded under a separate ARPA grant through Virginia Tourism. Phase 2 marina improvements at James City County Marina included boat shed demo, dredging, floating docks and infrastructure, parking, bathhouse, relocation of the boat ramp, parking for the marina, parking for the restaurant, replacement of the covered boat houses, and adding uncovered slips. This project too was funded in part through ARPA and has been shifted to the CIP. The Connect program provides a connection to supportive services for older adults to meet their individual needs by lifting barriers to social determinants of health to achieve their optimal status. The program started in 2018 as a collaboration between social services, fire, EMS, and police to address the impact on first responders due to an increase in senior and disabled residents utilizing emergency services for non-emergency needs. This limited-term position was established to work with Connect referrals. Referrals to the Connect program increased significantly due to the pandemic. The position allows the program to follow individuals who are at high risk, such as those with chronic disease, to help manage their conditions while working with social work case managers to address the social determinants, creating a barrier to meet their health needs. This position is currently funded in the general fund effective January 1, 2025 as well, but remains open because they do have a piece of equipment pending delivery that they have ordered. The replacement phone system project is in the early implementation phase with a contract in place. Staff and vendors are finalizing network configurations and user inventory. The next steps will be network testing, technical training for IRM staff, and planning for a site-by-site replacement of phone devices and establishment of user subscribers. Completion is anticipated in January, February of 2026. Cost for the fiber optic cabling maintenance was included in the FY22 CIP to expand the cabling and complete loops in the fiber infrastructure for redundancy. Project includes the replacement of aging communication equipment to meet modern high-speed needs. The first of 6 planned segments from the JCSA water treatment plant to Jamestown High School is complete. The second segment from Jamestown High School to Fire Station 5 will start construction in late January, providing fiber optic cabling to all county and school sites. And that is all I have. I'll have any questions.
I noticed that we have about 11.7, I guess, is of the open projects that we have a deadline of the December 26th to expend those funds. But it looks like we have effectively utilized those funds quite well for the design and start of our projects for our General Services Administration and County Complex. So,
Mr. Eisen, I think that's correct. We were trying to make sure we had those funds obligated and spent, so we have moved them around, and I think FMS and Stephanie done a great job tracking that to make sure that we've taken full advantage of the money that was provided to the county. And so we may have some movement as we go forward, but we'll be back to you to update you and tell you where those are. But I feel very good about where we are and the staff's attention to it, and that we will have that money to benefit our residents.
And this money has already been allocated to the county, is that right? Or?
Yes, sir. We have received the money, and many of her spent obligated numbers, they're not completed, but we have spent a significant amount of that money as well. So it's, while you see 3 million really closed out and another 11 million sort of pending, we have spent a significant amount of that as well.
any additional questions from the board? Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. The next is CIP discussion. Cheryl Holland will give the presentation.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the board. Good afternoon. I'm Cheryl Holland. I'm the Budget Director for the county. And today I'll provide information on capital requests received from departments for the FY 2026 through FY 2030 Capital Improvement Program. Please note this presentation reflects the cost and timing of projects as submitted on department's original requests. This is preliminary information. Amounts and timing are subject to change depending on resources available and the priorities of the county determined during the FY 26 budget process. To start off, this slide provides a brief summary of the Capital Improvement Program, or what I'll call CIP, as well as the request received. The county CIP is developed as part of our annual budget process. The CIP covers 5 years, providing a plan for the ongoing costs of long-term projects, as well as their anticipated funding sources, such as transfers from the general fund and debt funding. The first of the 5-year CIP is appropriated, and the remaining 4 years serve as a roadmap for the future. The upcoming budget will include a 5-year CIP covering FY 26 through FY 2030. CIP requests differ from operating requests in both their cost and nature. According to the county's threshold, a capital request has a cost of $50,000 or more, and that amount goes to the acquisition, construction, or renovation of a capital asset with an expected useful life of 10 years or more. There are 2 types of capital requests included in the budget process. Those are capital project requests and capital maintenance requests. Capital projects are the more significant items. These involve acquisition of property, building new facility, and other investments in infrastructure. Capital maintenance requests meet the $50,000 threshold, and they do involve capital assets with the 10-year at least useful life, but they're generally on a slightly smaller scale. Examples include roof replacements, HVAC repairs, fire apparatus replacements, parking lot paving, and other maintenance efforts. Today's presentation will focus on the capital project requests, but we'll also go over high-level information on those capital maintenance requests, especially given the number of those requests, their estimated cost, and the resources both in terms of dollars and personnel needed to complete those efforts. Going into the numbers, there were 35 capital project requests received this year, totaling $441.3 million in estimated costs, and there were 94 capital maintenance requests received, totaling $125.3 million. Of the maintenance requests, 39 relate to the county or the Toano Library, and 55 relate to the schools. And again, please note these requests are spread over FY26 through FY2030, the full 5-year period. For 2026 alone, the first year of the CIP, there are 15 capital project requests totaling $110 million and 40 capital maintenance requests totaling about $25 million. For some of the requests over this time frame, we've seen them in prior years, and they've been built into our prior CIP plans. When departments submit an entirely new request, they are generally asked to submit that in the latest year, which in this case would be FY 2030, unless there is some specific reason that the project should be moved to an earlier year of the plan. This gives the county time to prepare for the upcoming cost. Now, this slide provides summary information on just the project requests, broken down by department in the rows and fiscal year across the columns. The final column gives the total cost for the 5-year CIP. Please note this, again, does not include the capital maintenance items. Also, you'll see in that last line in italics, the total amount that was built into the previous CIP plan for the FY26 through FY29 capital projects in comparison to total requests for FY26 through 2030 in bold, right above that. On the next few slides, we'll go over the project requests for each department, and staff from departments are here should you have specific questions on the particular projects. First area we'll review is general administration. The titles of projects are in the first column and the current requests are in bold. You can see the amounts requested for these projects from FY26 through FY2030 in the middle 5 columns, and the last column provides the total cost requested for the project for the 5-year CIP. Under certain projects, you'll also see a line in italics, and that notes the amounts that were included in the previous CIP plan for FY26, again, through FY29. This allows you to see what the county has previously planned for compared to what's being requested for these particular projects. For general administration, the project requests focus on the Consolidated Government Center. The first line is the main government center project, which has been part of the plan for the last few years. This is for the construction and related improvements at the Long Hill Road site. The next line is the Consolidated Government Center addition, and this is a new request this year for a 60,000 square foot facility attached to the new government center that would serve alternate county or multi-jurisdictional use. The timing was based on minimizing the disruption to the area. This addition would be built concurrently with the new government center, and the use of the new addition is still to be determined. This next slide covers the project's requests from Parks and Recreation. The requests are shown in department's priority order. There are several projects that were included in the previous 5-year plan, but some of them did have changes to their timing and their cost in the current request received. For those projects that weren't included in the previous plan, I'd also like to note that some of these were submitted in the prior fiscal year, but they weren't able to be included in the plan because of limited resources or competing needs. I'll note that only the Chickahominy Riverfront Park new restrooms and concession building and the Upper County Park multi-use trail requests were not included in the request reviewed last year. Overall, Parks and Rec had 15 project requests at the following parks. I won't go project by project, but this does cover the new Lower County Park at Grove Community Park, the War Hill Sports Complex, the Marina, the Upper County Park, Green Springs Trail, Veterans Park, Chickahominy Riverfront Park, Jamestown Beach Event Park, and Brickyard Landing. And again, plan amounts are noted where applicable. Moving on to General Services, this slide presents information on their project requests. General Services Administration is that first line. This project has been part of CIP since FY23. In FY26, additional funds are requested for the fuel island that was just mentioned, furniture and equipment, and also to cover escalations in the construction costs. The stormwater infrastructure, this is an ongoing CIP initiative. Generally, funds are built into the plan each year for specific stormwater projects. FY26 includes watershed management plan retrofits at Scamino, Powhatan, Yarmouth, Diaskin, and Gordon Creeks, as well as other watershed management plan updates. For that stormwater infrastructure, there is the possibility of SLAF, stormwater local assistance funding as well. That third line is the warehouse. This is for a 15,000 square foot facility to store material and equipment in a centralized location for multiple departments. For example, fire, parks and rec, general services, social services, and others. This will address county storage needs, in particular those items that are being stored now in paid storage facilities. And lastly, there is the courthouse architectural and engineering services. This project request is for in addition to the Williamsburg James City County Courthouse to address space needs noted in a space needs study in 2020. This request is for the architectural and engineering services needed to develop the project, which would be for a 30,000 square foot addition. Given that this is a joint courthouse, we would also expect the city of Williamsburg to contribute their proportional share towards the cost of this project. Next is public safety. This slide covers both the request from the fire department and the police department. For the fire department, the first request is the replacement of Fire Station 3. This has been part of the CIP plan for the last few years. The intent is either a major renovation, an expansion, or a replacement of the existing Fire Station 3, and the requested amount has increased based on the latest design and construction estimates. There's also the new Fire Station 6 request. This is intended to improve response times and address increasing service demand, likely in the Lightfoot area. The police department requests include expansion of the firing range. This has been an ongoing project funded in the CIP. $885,000 approximately has been funded so far, and this $710,000 is an additional amount being requested for stormwater improvements and structures, including a control tower, restroom, storage, and a pavilion at the site. The vehicle covered parking request is for a 3-sided open front covered parking structure to provide protection to a number of specialty vehicles and trailers at the law enforcement center. And lastly, that police classroom and shoot house. This is a request for a climate controlled classroom at the firing range to be used for firearms training, as well as a place to store and use the department's modular shoot house. This slide, we have the request from the Williamsburg James City County School Division. Please note this slide reflects an estimate of the county share of the costs for these projects, not total cost. The proportionate share used in developing these numbers was last year's percentage. We are currently working with the city and the schools in determining the percentage for FY26. The projects for the schools include a bus canopy at Claire Bird Baker, additional funding for the pre-K space, roughly $35 million has been funded so far. A centralized storage facility of approximately 4,000 square feet adjacent to the Operations Center on Jolly Pond Road is that third request. And lastly, there's the Jamestown High School expansion. The FY 2030 request number there is for the design phase of that expansion. Moving on to the Williamsburg Regional Library, the goal of both of these requests is to meet recommended library facility needs of the county based on projected population. The first request is for a new 40,000 square foot library with an additional 10,000 square feet for a community theater. For perspective, the current Toano Library is 35,000 square feet. This request is built into the previous CIP as shown on the slide. The second request is for a library in the Grove area. This would be approximately 10,000 square feet, again, to meet the county's library needs in that area. And then finally, we have the community development capital project request. The first request is for the county's transportation match. This provides local match funding for transportation projects, typically in partnership with VDOT. In the past, this has been part of the Special Projects Fund, but the county will be moving it to CIP this year for several reasons, including the close connection between the transportation projects as well as stormwater efforts that are already built into the CIP fund. It's helpful to have these two in the same fund. The second line is the Open Space Match Program, and that provides local match funding for green space acquisition. This has been part of the CIP in prior years, as you can see in the plan line shown. And the third request is for the transit stop improvements. These funds would go towards bus stops for the Williamsburg Area Transit Authority. Now that we've gone through capital project requests, this slide gives a summary of those capital maintenance requests. The CIP provides a framework for these maintenance efforts, mapping out the needs and costs over the 5-year period according to priorities and resources. It's important to note that while a capital project or maintenance request may be approved and funded in a given year, that doesn't mean the project will be completed in that year. The majority of these requests involve long-term projects and long-term work from the department making the request, general services team managing the project, purchasing, handling the procurement efforts, accounting, handling all the vendor payments, and many other staff working to complete these. And when we think about the resources needed for CIP, we're talking about more than just the dollar amounts we've seen on these slides. We're also talking about the time and the staff, and it's important to think about the limitations we may face in those areas in addition to the funding. To help with that, we've included this slide that summarizes existing projects as of December 2024. This slide indicates the budgets remaining for previously approved capital projects and capital maintenance, and these were approved in FY25 and prior fiscal years. It's cumulative. As of December, that total amount was $139.9 million remaining. The number of projects and maintenance items shown is also an approximate total. Our financial system groups together certain items, so every project at the marina the last few years is just shown as one marina project in our system. Same thing with the schools. As a result, there are more than those 101 projects and maintenance items shown on the screen. In addition, there are projects in our ARPA fund, which you just heard about, and in our grants and special project fund, and again, those aren't included in these totals here. These only add to the workload on staff. So while considering the CIP request for FY26 through FY2030, it's important to keep these competing needs and priorities as well as resource limitations in mind. That concludes my presentation on FY26 through FY2030 CIP requests, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Fire away.
Where to start?
Yeah.
I guess the first question I just have is we keep everything is conditioned here as requests.
Yes.
Is this how much of this is anticipated?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the board, I think part of the intent here was to provide you the CIP request ahead of your retreat. So to give you an insight of sort of where we start, what we normally would present to you would have a lot of this shifted around, pushed out, back into balance. Some of these increases are inflationary costs, and so we will have to make a decision. Can we afford it all? And there will be, I believe, some projects that move further out. And then some of this increase is reflecting in the government center and general services projects that the costs are getting closer to being actual, and they are significantly more than we had talked about pre-COVID. And so that's part of the debate really with you next week. We have department heads here and others. If you have questions about particular projects, we would try to answer those or process, but it really was just trying to set you up to have information ahead of the retreat. The other parts you don't have that we normally have later in the funding process is how much money do we anticipate being available annually for our CIP projects. Normally that's probably a late February, early March number. I know FMS staff is working hard to have a number by your retreat to tell you we really foresee having this kind of a money available year to year for the next 5 years, recognizing you only approve in the FY26 budget that year, but the other years we want to have a plan on how we would finance or provide funding for that as well.
Financial advisors, Davenport will be at the board retreat to go over our debt capacity.
I think that the benefit of this is early in the process. This is before it's been run through the sausage grinder. But I wanted to make sure that we had a chance to see what was being considered. And I think it's appropriate at this point, between now and our board retreat, which is in just a couple of weeks, to provide any kind of policy guidance we might want to give the staff, Scott and his staff, about what we would like to see as the result, where some of our priorities might be, so that might be of assistance in them going through that process of pushing out, moving in, trimming, and consolidating things as they go through it. But it's important. I think at the retreat, I would hope we would have the ability to look at not only the CIP, but at like you talked about, the funding, what kind of debt capacity we have, and how closely it matches up, and how we can do what we want to do and still maintain our fiscal policies and stay within our constraints.
Well, if we each send out our priorities and they're all different, I don't know, I don't see how that's going to work for staff, because it would seem to me that we're better off at the retreat trying to figure out, or to have a more open discussion about, you tell me yours and I'll tell you mine, and then they're going to have to, because I don't think you're going to be in a position to tell us at the retreat, or what is it easier to give, like I say, I've been talking about softball fields at War Hill for 9 years now. I'd like to see that happen. But if Supervisor Knoll says, well, I'm really interested in the splash pad, so
Ms. Larson, I think there'll be some projects that the board sort of all agrees these are important and these ought to move forward. And then I think there'll be some where one really feels it's important, maybe the rest don't, and we'll have to sort of work through that. With Parks and Rec kind of projects, for me, and working with the department, we do try to move that around the county, so it's not all in one place. But that sometimes happens and sometimes not as well. But those are things where your involvement and discussion will help us sort of bring back what we think is a close proposal for you to consider as part of your budget adoption that'll come out in the proposed budget. And then you'd have the month of April and May to sort of reorient them if you want. But this gives the board a much earlier opportunity to provide that guidance versus us doing it and then sort of sending it out. But I think some you'll all support very quickly. Some you'll probably all agree ought to be pushed out. And then there'll be some in the middle we'll debate. How do we make those happen and where?
Now, there's some items in this year's CIP that are not going to expend those funds this year, presumably. And so how does that figure into the process?
FMS has done, and Ms. Holland can correct me, but they've done a really good job for me of the carry forward projects. That was the last slide that showed you about $130-some million of projects that are there. Departments are working to expend those as they go forward in time with staffing and availability and contracts and those kinds of things. So those funds are obligated and out there. When we come back in, if a project has taken more years to get bid than we thought, sometimes we have those escalating costs, and they do work to try to either reduce that or work within the money we would have to come back to the board for funding. They don't really factor into the next 5-year projection. We're assuming those projects are going to be able to move forward with the funding they have. And going forward, we would make a request if something didn't happen, but the next 5 years is focused on additional funding for the county, and yet that's the money we'd be looking to talk about going forward.
I think some of the priorities that we were talking about are clearly, when you talk about education, I think we still have the request for additional funding to get the pre-K facilities done. So that would be a priority, I think, in my opinion. But that may not be the priority shared with the board. But that's what I need to find out. When we talk about the major projects that we have underway, we've already expended like $6 million worth of ARPA money in the design of these 2 buildings, one for the general services and one for the county complex. And so, we're pretty far down the pike on that, and we need to take a very close look at what those projections are and how we're going to accomplish those things. And that would tend to, in my mind, fall sort of next. And then we look at places like, I'm sure there's some things that we would all like to see in Parks and Rec. It's just, Parks and Rec, unfortunately, usually winds up being short end of the stick. And we need to have a priority focus on where we wanted to do some things. We've been focusing on a park in the south end of the county in the Grove area for quite a while.
And it's still not built.
And so those are the sort of the competing priorities that we're going to be presented with. I would expect staff to make the ultimate nitty-gritty decisions, but I think what we need to do at our retreat is to give them a little bit more of an idea of what our priorities or what our concerns would be, about and how we address the expenditures over the next 5 years. Because clearly it's not all going to fit in one bag. So they're going to have to be decisions made and cuts made and things reorganized. But I wanted to make sure that the board was involved in this, because unfortunately, if we're not involved to a certain degree at this point, by the time the budget gets to us, we've never seen this. We just see the final product, and we don't know whether maybe something else should have been in there or shouldn't have been in there, and it's a little late for us to be making those kinds of decisions that far down the process. So I want to see us get involved in this at an earlier stage, and this is just preparatory for discussions at our retreat. We'll all have opinions at the retreat.
And it gets complicated, obviously, because we don't know exactly what kind of financial issues we are dealing with. One of the aspects, of course, is we have some budget amendments proposal. We had a budget amendment proposal sitting in Richmond to help close that gap in the pre-K centers. We also know that there was money left in the surplus from the schools that will have an impact on that, or can have an impact on that. Maybe we will be able to, if we can get the budget amendment approved, maybe we can shift some of that money to other school projects. So it is a moving target, but I think it's good to know what's out there and what we're having to choose among, and whether there's anything outstanding that we really haven't taken into account yet. You can keep track of all this, right, Ms. Holland?
We have a spreadsheet for it.
Yeah, you do a great job.
Yes, thank you so much. Okay. We are now over to Government Center update. Brad Van Ammer. Oh, hiding over there.
On a different side of the room. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, board members, Mr. Stevens, Mr. Kinsman. I guess fortunately don't have too much to talk about. As you all know, the first interim agreement expired in November. The board took action in December to authorize Mr. Stevens to sign a second interim agreement. We've been working through the details of that second interim agreement. In fact, I got the list of attachments and deliverables about 10 minutes before this meeting today. So that will be hopefully signed here in the next week or so. We did meet with the Henderson Group this morning to talk about the updates to the traffic impact analysis, with the potential of that being a library as the addition to the Government Center, and how that might impact any improvements on the site or to the roadways around the projected Government Center. I'm sure I know we'll have a lot more discussions about this with CIP projects at the retreat, and the desire of the board to move forward with a library at that site or not. But we'll have those discussions at the retreat on February 7th. So I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Brief.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, board considerations. We have a contract award, $517,552 for Chickahominy Riverfront Park well facility design. And Joan Towers to give us staff for that presentation.
Good afternoon, Chair Eisenhower, members of the board, Mr. Stevens. The resolution before the board today is for the award of a contract to Bowman Consulting Group for the Chickahominy Riverfront Park well facility design in the amount of $517,552. This project consists of the design of the well facility building and all associated site improvements. This project represents phase 2, where phase 1 was the drilling of the wells, which has been completed. An RFP was issued, and Bowman Consulting Group was found to be the most responsive and responsible bidder. Bowman Consulting Group completed the work for phase 1 of the project as well. Staff recommends approval of the resolution, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Good. Questions for staff?
No.
Okay. Questions? All right.
I'll move the motion.
Okay, we have a motion. Mr. Stevens, call the roll, please.
Mr. McGlennon?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, board request and directives. Barbara, you want to start?
I've done anything since the last meeting. I'm trying to remember. I do so much, I can't remember everything. I think we're good. I'm good.
Okay.
Oh, boy.
Yeah,
I'll be brief. I would just urge people to pay attention to what's going on in Richmond. There's a lot going on, and a lot of it involves things that take decisions that are best made in your local community, away from your local community. And something, for instance, if we were to not approve a solar farm, that solar farm could go up to an oversight commission at the state level, and they could say, oh, well, let's let them put a solar farm there then. I don't know that we've had that much Airbnb this time, but something similar to is you can have an Airbnb anywhere as long as it's managed by someone that's a broker. So not a decision that would be made here. So it's decisions like that, and it's a very short session because they're already, I think they've lost 3 days, so things are moving very quickly. But we received an email, or I did last week, that I do need to answer the citizen. I haven't had an opportunity to yet, saying that they had noticed that the federal government was trying to work on taxes, and we should too. And I don't disagree with that, but I would just urge people that often what happens is the federal government cuts taxes, they send that to the state cuts the taxes, and they send that to us. So someone's got to pay for the bills. So I've just urged people to pay attention to what's going on other places other than just here. On a sad note, I would like to send my very deepest sympathies to the Isle of Wight Board of Supervisors, and most especially Supervisor McCarty's family. Supervisor McCarty was the chair last year of HRPTO, and also he was president-elect for VACO, served on the VACO board for quite a few years, been very active. He and his wife also provided much-needed mental health counseling services to the youth of Isle of Wight, a need that came up during COVID, and he unexpectedly passed away over the weekend. And so just want to send my deepest sympathies to his family and to his colleagues on the Board of Supervisors there. So lots going on, but that can wait till the next time. So thank you. Great. I would like to just say great presentations today. Lots of really good information, and I apologize for being 5 minutes late.
A couple of things, just to run down really quickly. I attended the Day of Racial Healing. Mr. Eisenhower, you were there in attendance as well, on the 16th, was the week ago, Tuesday. It was a very impressive meeting and performance. Really enjoyed it very much. We also attended the Chamber of Commerce meeting and heard a great deal of activity that's going on with the Chamber, and appreciate their activism on a whole host of areas. Also, that they had reported on a remarkable success for the Home for the Holidays program. Mr. Eisenhower has been actively involved in that program, and I understand he's continuing in that role as we move forward. We went to Richmond, Mr. Eisenhower and I went and joined, Mr. Stevens went up to the VACO Local Government Day. We got to hear President Ruth Larson address all of the assembled county officials and send us off on the mission of talking to our legislators. We had already been to visit with our legislators, who graciously provided us an opportunity to lay out our legislative priorities, both in terms of things we'd like to see happen and things we would not like to see happen, and got a very positive response from the legislators from that perspective. Yesterday I attended a meeting in the Old Town Medical Center, Old Town Medical and Dental Clinic, where they were working on updates to their strategic plan, and where we were nudged a little bit to provide some cost of living increases to our contribution to them, and questions about the relative rental rates that they are currently paying versus the rates that other nonprofits in the community are paying. So I just lay that out there. And also wanted to see if I can read what, oh yes, I attended a very nice retirement reception for our school superintendent, Alwyn Heron, with very emotional and inspiring presentations by people who have been part of her career all the way through, from Northern Ireland to Virginia Beach to Texas, and back here to Williamsburg, James City County. She has served our community well, and really we all wish her the very best in her retirement choices. I do have to make one correction. At our last meeting, I spoke about the passing of Abram Frink, and I made the statement that it was believed he was the first African-American chairman of a county board in Virginia. We are fortunate to have some very experienced journalists in the community, including Wilfred Cale, who used to write for the Richmond Times-Dispatch, now writes for the Virginia Gazette, and Will Molyneux, who worked for the Times-Herald when that existed back in the day, the afternoon paper for the Daily Press. And they concluded that, in fact, the year before Mr. Frink became our board chair, both Charles City County and Surrey County had an African-American chair elected. So he was one of the groundbreakers, but not the very first. So but it does not do anything to diminish his importance to our community or to his legacy. Thank you.
Thank you.
On the 16th, I attended the HRTPO, HRPDC meetings with Mr. Hipple and Mr. Stevens, and I think we saw some very interesting decisions being taken on transportation funding. They're trying to create a different maintenance fund over there. They sent a resolution forward to the General Assembly. We'll see how that works out. As Supervisor McGlennon mentioned, I was also attended the Day of Racial Healing, a very impressive ceremony. On the 22nd, I did our first of the kickoff year for the year, WMBG radio interviews. So we'll have a schedule for our Board of Supervisors every 2 weeks to have a presence on that. Attended VACO Local Government Day and felt it was very important that we were there, and that the use of our folks up there that we have under contract to help us lobby was really, really important. Got us in and out to see our legislators quite effectively, and so it was a productive day. Attended Dr. Heron's retirement as well. Yesterday I had a meeting with the chair of the Surrey County Board of Supervisors, Robert Elliott, in regard to the bill they have for trying to study a potential bridge across the James River, and expressed to him our concerns. And right now that bill, I believe, is still in Senate Finance, and so we don't know how that's going to work out. But he was stressing that it's just for a study, and we'll see how it comes. I told him he'd probably have less opposition if he took the name James City County out of it and just made a reference to a potential crossing somewhere, preferably upstream.
But isn't their second option Charles City? But that would still, wouldn't they wouldn't it still be Judith Dresser?
The second option that they discussed was Charles City. If you take a look at the map, and they go up to the northern end of their county and come across right over just north of the, where the Chickahominy River, is, the Judith Dresser Bridge. It's the shortest distance across the river in quite a spot. If you come down further where we are, it's a much longer bridge across the river. So it'd be a shorter bridge up there, and it would connect in maybe about a mile north of into Charles City County, so on Route 5. That's one of the other alternatives that they're looking at.
Yeah, but if it were to increase, what they're looking to do, which I understand, is to increase their population, correct? The strain would still then be on, it would still add some added strain to us on the Route 5 area.
It would, yes.
So,
In fact, I would wonder whether part of the objective is really to have an opportunity to attract some distribution centers, warehousing to agricultural land in Surrey that would then bring large trucks through whatever the crossing point would be. I think it would be much more sensible for them to be looking at an enhancement of the roadway down to 58 and really put more resources onto completing the expansion of 58.
it's just for me, we already have a pull up at the Lightfoot area where York has continued to expand their footprint without any road improvement, putting we have a lot of Richmond Road there. We have a lot of congestion, Moortown Airport, and then, so now we're going to get it at the other end. So without, I would hope that at least it would come with some money, so.
Well, right now, we're waiting to see what happens with the Senate finances, because what they're requesting at this point is a study, but the price tag associated with the study is quite extensive, so I'm not sure whether they'll get the funding or not. We'll see. Then the last thing is yesterday attended Mayors and Chairs. Turnout was reasonable. The food was excellent. We went down to Pocosin and had crab cake for lunch. But it was an opportunity to network and talk to everybody else about what's going on in your different communities. And we do it again in, I think, April in Newport News. So I'm looking forward to that one. And that's all I have. Mr. Stevens, we'll go to the reports to County Administrator.
Mr. Chair, nothing to report today.
Okay.
May I request a 5-minute recess before our closed session?
If we can, we'll take a 5-minute recess.
Thank you.
back into order. And before we ask for a closed session, I wanted to make sure we let everybody know that we're very proud of Supervisor Null for being appointed to the State Executive Council for Children's Services. It's always reflects well on James City County and our staff when we have folks from here who can help out at the state level.
Right,
So
congratulations.
Congratulations,
Thank you.
Barbara, and we really appreciate having that extra voice in Richmond. So,
I did have
good.
one additional question for our county administrator.
sir.
I know that today there was an announcement about freeze on federal funding. I did hear when I was in Richmond this morning that Head Start was impacted. Just not for today, but if you could just let us know maybe in your Friday notes if there is any impact to the county or to the school system, what that might be. Okay.
Ms. McCarty, our FMS director, and I have talked about that. We are trying to sift through that. Short term, I think we are okay. It's a matter of extent and what happens after the February kind of deadline, but we will try to summarize where we're concerned about and share that with you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. May I have a motion to enter closed session for the following? Number one, consideration of a personnel matter, the appointment of individuals to county boards and or commissions pursuant to section 2.23711A1 of the Code of Virginia. A, appointment to the Board of Zoning Appeals, and B, Planning Commission. And two, consultation with legal counsel employed by the public body regarding the enforcement of zoning's ordinance 24-35, requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel pursuant to section 2.23711A8. And three, discussion of the award of a public contract involving the expenditure of public funds and the discussion of the terms or scope of such contract, where discussion in an open session would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body pursuant to section 2.23711A29 of the Code of Virginia and pertaining to the contract for the joint operation of schools between the county and the city of Williamsburg.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion.
sorry.
Mr. Stevens, call the roll, please.
Ms. Null?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, we are in closed session. and I will look for a motion to certify the closed session.
Move to certify that we only spoke about those items we indicated we would speak back about going into closed session.
Mr. Stevens, call the roll.
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan? Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move that we adopt a resolution calling for the consideration of a zoning ordinance amendment to Section 2435 of the County Code, requiring the provision of, oh, sorry, that's not necessary. But just move that resolution.
Okay, initiating amendments to the zoning ordinance 2435. Okay, we have a motion. Mr. Stevens, call the roll.
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan? Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Motion carries.
I'd like to make a motion to appoint Steve Rogers to the Planning Commission with a term that would end on January 31st, 2028.
Stevens, call the roll, please.
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. And I think that's.
One more.
One,
Zoning Board of Appeals.
oh, zoning board of appeals, yes.
Oh, I would nominate David Odie
Okay.
to the BZA for the term that's in,
Do we recommend him?
through the recommended term.
We'll recommend him to the judge, right?
Recommended to the judge. Yes, thank you, John.
Ms. Knoll? Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. And I think that concludes our business. I'll look for a motion to adjourn until 12 p.m. on February 7th for a board retreat.
So moved.
James, call the roll, please.
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye. We are adjourned.